I just finished making this queen-size bed frame. It's based on fellow Alaskan Anna White's plans, but I changed them quite a bit. Be sure to stick around to the end. I'll go over all the mistakes and what to watch for when you're making one of these. But stick around and I'll show you how I made this. Step one is making the legs 21 inches and 54 inches. I really made it hard on myself by making my own 4x4s. I took some poplar, cut them to width, and then glued them together. And I wouldn't recommend this unless you have lots of clamps and extra time, because it added a day to the project for sure. I clamped them all together. That way I just left them overnight once and came back and all four were ready to go. After I took them out of the clamps, I took them over the planer to get the edges nice and flush and to make them the correct width. I sanded them down all the way up to 220, and then I put the finish on. Now I made a whole video on why I chose the finish that I did, but I used amber shellac on the legs and the trim, and then I used regular shellac on the slats for the headboard and the footboard. I also used amber on the trim for the drawers, and then regular shellac on the drawer faces. The reason why I did that was because it dries so fast. An hour later I could sand it down and put another coat on. I ended up doing 3 coats on all of them, sanding down. I have some pads I bought off Amazon that I use to smooth it out between coats. Shellac, I could get the finish all done in one day versus other finishes where I'd have to wait hours or even overnight to put a second finish on. So shellac was a finish of choice for me. And I really like how it came out, especially on the cherry that I did for the trim on the top. Once the legs were done, I worked on the 2x4s. The footboard requires 2 2x4s. Headboard requires 4. Be careful on the placement on these. I'll take you through that at the end. I added 1 more to make a total of 3 2x4s on the footboard, and I'll go over the reason why, mistakes and stuff you have to look out for at the end. Once you get the 2x4s cut to length, you can put pocket screws in them. Be sure to set your jig up correctly, meaning 1.5 inch stock, and then set your drill bit up for 2.5 inch screws. Those will be screwed right into the legs in a later step. Step 3 is cutting your slats, getting them to the right width. And I cut all mine prior to attaching my 2x4s to the legs, and that was a mistake. Once I laid the slats out onto the 2x4s, I realized I didn't like the way it looked. It looked like just one big panel. So I went over to my router table and put a chamfer on all the edges, and I like the look of that. It brings out that space between the slats a lot more. Consider doing that. You could skip all the slats if you want and just put plywood back there. So after getting the slats all cut, I finished everything. I wanted to finish it before I put it together, and I set that aside and started working on the plywood boxes. Now the tops and the bottoms are 24 inches wide. So a full sheet of plywood on a table saw, I just don't do that anymore. I used my track saw to cut them to rough dimensions and then took them over to the table saw and made sure they were all the same. I went ahead and cut the partitions as well for the drawers. So you have 4 on each side, the ends, and then the partitions for the drawers. I went ahead and marked all the positions of the partitions on the bottom. I did it according to the drawings. That way I knew exactly where the partitions would go. I then took the partitions and put pocket holes in them. And be sure to check your jig again. You're using 3/4 inch. And on this one I used 1.25 inch screws. When I put the partitions in, you want to make sure they're perfectly square. I used glue and my corner clamps. And I realized I didn't have enough corner clamps for all the partitions in the end, so I made my own on the CNC out of wood. And those turned out pretty well. You just clamp them down, make sure everything stays square. And there's a reason why I say square a lot. Really critical to keep everything square in this project. Otherwise your drawers won't work. Go slow. Make sure those pocket screws don't move the partition at all, and you'll be good. Once I got all the partitions screwed into the bottom, I put glue on top of the partitions and then the top on. And then I used pocket screws to hold everything together, and that made it nice and solid. For the back part, I used 1/2 inch plywood, and I glued and brad nailed that. And then I came back, pre-drilled some holes and put some screws in it. Now these drawers are really deep. They're 24 inches deep. It's probably overkill. You may want to make them 16 or 20 inches deep. The real reason is I had a bunch of 24 inch door slides I've had sitting around the shop for a year. and I wanted to get them used up, and it was perfect. This is a perfect project for it. Used them all up. So these drawer slides, the drawer slides are pretty much all the same. They come in two pieces. You separate them. You put one onto the cabinet, and then you put one onto the drawer. Once you have them separated, then I use a spacer, and I use the same spacer on all the drawer slides. That way they all stay exactly the same height off the bottom of the cabinet. And then I use a self-centering drill bit. That's real critical to have one of those, I think, because if you try to just put the screw into these drawer slides, it could skew it just a little bit, just enough to make sure that you're not perfectly square. You'll see on the drawer slides, I use the tabs on there. That way, if you make your drawers just a little bit narrow, the drawer slides can make up for it. If you make them a little bit too wide, I got nothing for you. I take the drawer slides and I make them flush to the front of the cabinet. And once all those are installed, you can start working on your drawer boxes. I don't want to make this video about making drawer boxes, but I use the quarter method to make the boxes, and that involves putting a 1/4-inch dado stack into your table saw, cutting dados on one edge and cutting a rabbet on the other. Once you put those together, it makes a really strong joint, and it allows you to put a 1/4-inch panel into the bottom of your drawers. Makes for a real strong drawer box. I just wanted to challenge myself on making boxes with a new joint, so that's the reason why I did it. Once I got the drawer boxes put together and glued, I verified it. They were all square, and you use a tape measure. Each diagonal should be exactly the same. If they're not, then you need to loosen up your clamps and get it right. Those drawer boxes have to be square. The next step is making the drawer faces. Poplar, I made panels that were wide enough for these drawer faces. And then I used my CNC to cut a pocket out. And then I finished the outside with amber shellac and the inside with the clear shellac. I then took it over to my CNC table and laser burned some dog stuff. My son says I'm a crazy dog person, but yes, we are. Once the drawer faces were made, then I put the trim on. This is all 3/4-inch trim that I put all the way around the drawer face. I wanted to challenge myself and make a flush mount drawer, so I used a playing card trick where I tried to get the gap the same all the way around with playing cards. It was a challenge. These slides are not the easiest to adjust. I would suggest if you're going to go flush mount to use the bottom mount. Those drawer slides are a lot easier to adjust. So once I got the drawer faces spaced correctly, getting them attached to the drawer boxes, I just used my Craig jig for that. And that helps you put on drawer handles. You can get it centered and the spacing correctly for your drawer handles. By using that jig, I can drill the holes on all these drawer faces at exactly the same spot, so it stays consistent. I also use those holes, once I drill them, to attach them temporarily to the drawer boxes. Once it's attached temporarily, I can open the drawer carefully, pre-drill from the inside of the box and screw the drawer face permanently to the box. Once that's done, I can take out the temporary screws, drill all the way through, and then attach my handles. Then it was time to put the headboard and the footboard together. First I started on the headboard. So I attached my two top ones using my corner clamps, clamped my corner clamps on there, made sure they're flush with the legs, and then put the 2.5-inch screws in there. Be sure you have them clamped down, because when you're putting in those screws, it can actually move the wood. So be sure they're clamped down so they don't move once you get everything set up exactly the way you want it. Once the two top 2x4s are in, I could put the slats in. I use glue and brad nails on them since they're going to be covered up by trim anyway. And then I'll put the bottom 2x4s on. Don't make the same mistake I made. These 2x4s go on the other side of your post, because this is where you're going to bolt these two boxes onto. The first two go on the back side, the second two go on the front side of your post. When I first put them together, I made them all on the back side of the post and quickly realized my mistake, took it out and put it onto the front side. Looking at the drawings every once in a while helps, and make sure you get the dimensions correctly from the ground, because that's where you're going to be bolting your plywood boxes to. Once I got everything brad nailed in, I went ahead and put the cherry wood in here, and I used clamps. You won't see any nail holes in there. I just use glue and clamps. Once those are done, it's time for the top pieces. And originally I was going to put a 2x4 on the top, but I went with two 1x4s. One is flush with the post, And then the top piece is a little bit wider. I think it's 5 inches versus the 3.5 inches of the lower one. And then I let it overhang just for looks. Let it overhang. And I use cherry wood for these tops. These are all poplar 1x4s, and I spaced them 2.5 inches. For the mattress I'm using, it's important to get lots of airflow underneath of it. So I went ahead and drilled 1.25 inch holes all through here in between the slats. Now, once I get them into the bedroom, I'll use these 2 7/8 headlocks. They replace 3/8 lag screws. I couldn't find these in 2-inch, so these will be going into the legs. And then into the 2x4s, I've got some 2-inch 3/8 lag screws. So I'll put those in and just be sure the head is small enough to not interfere with the drawers. The drawings call for this to be 4 inches off the ground on the post on each side. So to help me, I made 2 4x4s. I made them myself so they'd be exactly 4 inches instead of 3.5 that a 4x4 is. So I have 4 4x4s that will help support these big boxes, not just screwed into the headboard and footboard. Okay, you've stuck around to the end. Let's talk about some of the things that I wish I would have done differently. I wish I would have just invested in the bottom style drawer glides. These are a pain in the butt to try to get the drawer faces flush. And then I might have made the drawer boxes not quite so deep. I also am concerned about this last drawer up here because we have nightstands. And I think I'm going to build like a floating shelf type nightstand for the sides of the beds because this drawer won't open all the way with the nightstand sitting right here. So keep that in mind. Maybe cut the drawer in half, make half of this a usable drawer. I don't know, I'll figure out something. Another thing is building this thing to the drawing specs. This 2x4 doesn't give you enough room to put a good size lag into it. So what I've done is I added another 2x4 onto the bottom. That way there'll be plenty to put lags into on the top and the bottom. Cutting the drawer faces out with the CNC was probably a mistake. It took over an hour for each drawer face, and it made such a mess. I mean, I had dust all over the shop and couldn't finish anything till all the dust died down, so probably should have used a more traditional way of making the drawer faces, but it came out fairly nice. Thanks for sticking around to the end. If this video has helped you at all, please like and subscribe below. Sit. Good boy.